The Aurora drifted deeper into the unknown regions of space, far beyond the known territories of humanity. The crew was tense, but the silence of deep space was all too familiar to them. They had been traveling for weeks, following the mysterious signal that had led them here. The signal had come from a distant part of the galaxy, one never explored before by human eyes. The communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Lynn, had been the first to pick it up. At first, they thought it was nothing more than interference, but as the signal grew clearer, it became undeniable. Something, or someone, was out there. Captain Nera stood in the command center, staring at the map of their current location. Her eyes narrowed. "We're close," she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet sense of unease. The signal had stopped being a faint pulse and had become a steady stream of information. It was now so strong that it was impossible to ignore. "Lieutenant, can you pinpoint the origin?" Captain Nera asked. Lieutenant Lynn adjusted her console and looked up, her face pale. "It's coming from that ship, Captain." She pointed to a massive object on their display, something that was completely unexpected. It was a derelict alien ship, its hull battered and ancient, floating alone in the cold vacuum of space. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Aurora. Its design was nothing like anything the crew had ever seen. The smooth, curved surface of the ship shimmered with strange, iridescent patterns that seemed to change with the angle of light. The markings on the hull were indecipherable, and there were no visible signs of life or energy emissions. The crew felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Captain Nera felt her heart race. This was the moment. They had just discovered something that could change everything. They were the first humans to make contact with an alien species, but at the same time, the silence surrounding the ship felt ominous. They couldn't be sure if the ship was abandoned or if it was waiting for them. They had no idea what awaited them on board. "Prepare for docking," Captain Nera ordered. "We're going aboard." The Aurora slowly approached the alien ship, its massive size making it appear even more intimidating. The crew's movements were careful and calculated, every moment filled with tension. There were no signs of danger, no weapons, no signs of hostility, but that only made them more cautious. A ship this size, abandoned or not, could hide dangers that they couldn't anticipate. As the two ships connected, a strange hum filled the command deck. The lights flickered for a moment before stabilizing. The docking bay doors slowly opened, revealing an empty, dark hallway inside the alien vessel. The air inside was stale, and the lights seemed to be on their last legs, flickering faintly as they illuminated the walls. "Stay close," Captain Nera instructed, leading the first team of explorers out of the airlock. Lieutenant Lynn, Lieutenant Commander Eidenbrock, and Dr. Emily Torres followed, their boots echoing on the metallic floor. The air inside the ship was unlike the artificial atmosphere of the Aurora. There was something organic about it, almost alive. It made the hairs on the back of Nera's neck stand up. They passed through corridors lined with strange, pulsating veins that seemed to be part of the ship's very structure. The walls themselves were alive, breathing with a strange energy. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Brock murmured, his voice filled with awe and suspicion. "It doesn't feel like a ship at all. It feels like it's part of something larger." Nera nodded, her mind racing. The ship was not only alien in its appearance, but also in the very nature of its existence. It was as though the ship and its creators had transcended the need for traditional technology. Every corner of the ship seemed like it was alive, and there was an odd hum, almost like a heartbeat, echoing through the walls. They reached a central chamber. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a vast, spherical room filled with intricate, organic-looking structures. In the center stood a figure, tall and humanoid in shape, but far from human. It had an ethereal glow around it, its skin translucent and shimmering like the ship itself. The figure was connected to the ship by long, thin tendrils that seemed to pulse with energy. The figure turned its head, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was no movement, no sign of aggression. It simply stood there, waiting. Captain Naira felt a shiver run down her spine, but she stood her ground. "We come in peace," she said, trying to steady her voice. Her words seemed to resonate, echoing in the chamber. The figure tilted its head, as if understanding the meaning of her words, though no sound came from it. Dr. Emily Torres stepped forward cautiously, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "It's communicating with us," she whispered. "Not with words, but with thought. I can feel something. A presence." The alien's eyes flickered, and suddenly, a burst of images flooded the minds of the crew. It was overwhelming. A rush of strange landscapes, alien cities, and ancient memories that felt both distant and familiar. The crew staggered back, disoriented. They realized then that the alien being wasn't just trying to communicate. It was offering them a glimpse into its very soul. Naira shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She wasn't sure what to make of what she had just experienced. Was this a greeting? Or was it something else? The crew had encountered an alien intelligence, but they still didn't understand its intentions. Were they here to help, or did they have something more sinister planned? Before Naira could ask another question, the alien moved. Slowly, it extended a hand, and as it did, a soft glow enveloped the room. The hum grew louder, and for the first time, the crew felt an overwhelming sense of calm, as if the alien being was inviting them to step forward, to join it in some shared understanding. But before they could respond, the ship shuddered. A deep rumble echoed through the walls, and the floor beneath them began to tremble. Something was happening. Something powerful, and possibly dangerous, was awakening within the alien ship. The Aurora drifted deeper into the uncharted regions of space, the silence of the void surrounding it. The crew had been chasing the mysterious signal for days, an odd pulse that began faint but grew stronger with each passing hour. No one knew what to make of it. At first, Lieutenant Sarah Lynn had thought it was a glitch, something to ignore. But as the signal intensified, she couldn't deny its clear, deliberate rhythm. It was a message, something, or someone, out there was calling them. Captain Naira stood at the command console, her eyes fixed on the readings. The signal was stronger now, unmistakable, and unlike anything they had encountered before. They had no choice but to investigate, set course to the signal's origin. Naira commanded, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of excitement and anxiety. The crew watched in awe as their ship moved toward the source of the signal, a point in space that had been mapped as empty. But as they approached, an object came into view, massive, dark, and unrecognizable. It was a ship, but not like anything human eyes had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, metallic, and shimmering, almost like liquid, with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse and shift with the light. The ship looked ancient, its hull marked by signs of wear. Yet it was far larger than the Aurora, easily 3 times its size. The crew couldn't help but stare in awe and trepidation. They had just found something that could change everything, but there was no way of knowing what dangers it might hold. As the Aurora docked with the alien vessel, the air was thick with tension. The crew donned their suits and prepared to board. There was no sign of life on the exterior of the ship, but that only made them more wary. What awaited them inside could be a mystery or a threat. Captain Naira gave the order to proceed. As the docking bay doors opened, the team stepped into the ship. The moment they crossed the threshold, they were met with a deep, eerie silence. The air was stale, almost as if it had not been disturbed in millennia. The dim lights inside flickered weakly, casting strange shadows across walls that appeared organic, alive in some way. The entire ship felt different, like it wasn't a machine at all, but something biological. "Stay alert," Naira said softly, her voice cutting through the stillness. The crew's boots made soft echoes as they moved deeper into the ship, the corridors narrow and winding, as if the ship had been designed with a different kind of logic. The walls pulsed gently, like veins, and the strange hum they'd heard before grew louder. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Brock whispered, awe and uncertainty in his voice. The walls seemed alive, breathing, as if the ship itself was aware of their presence. They passed hallways filled with symbols and markings, but none were recognizable. It was clear that this ship was not made by human hands. This was something far older, far stranger. As they moved further in, they finally came upon a large central chamber. The doors opened with a hiss, revealing a vast room that seemed to stretch endlessly. In the center of the room stood a figure, tall and imposing, yet eerily calm. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin shimmered like liquid metal, translucent and glowing faintly. The figure was connected to the ship itself by long, delicate tendrils, which seemed to pulse with energy. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen, an alien being so strange it almost defied comprehension. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and when it turned to face them, the crew froze. For a long moment, there was only silence. The figure made no move, but its gaze seemed to pierce through them, as if it were reading their thoughts. Naira took a step forward, her voice calm but steady. "We come in peace," she said, hoping to make a connection, though she had no idea if the alien understood her words. The figure's eyes flickered in response, and then, without a word, it raised its hand, its fingers delicate yet purposeful. As it moved, a wave of energy surged through the room, and suddenly, the crew was no longer standing in the chamber. Instead, they were bombarded with a flood of images, strange landscapes, and alien cities. Memories, perhaps, or visions, but they were overwhelming. It was as if the being was showing them its entire history, its past, its people. The flood of information was dizzying, and the crew staggered back, disoriented and unsure of what they had just experienced. "Is it communicating?" Dr. Emily Torres asked, her voice shaky. She had felt the alien presence in her mind, like a pressure against her thoughts. There were no words, no language, but there was an undeniable connection. The alien was offering them something, an invitation to understand, to join it in some way. The figure extended its hand, and the energy in the room intensified. There was a strange calm that followed, and the crew felt a sudden sense of peace, as if the alien was inviting them to be part of something greater. But Naira's instincts screamed at her to be cautious. The feeling was almost too soothing, too easy. She hesitated, knowing that they couldn't trust this being without understanding its true intentions. Before she could speak, the ship suddenly shuddered. A low rumble vibrated through the floor, and the lights flickered wildly. Something was happening. Something powerful, something dangerous. The alien being's eyes flared with an intense, almost predatory glow. Naira's mind raced, and she knew they had walked into something far beyond their understanding. The signals, the invitation, and now this sudden shift. It was as if the ship itself was awakening, and they had triggered something. The crew had no choice but to act quickly. They needed to understand what was happening, and more importantly, what the alien wanted from them. Were they safe, or had they just walked into a trap? The answers were just out of reach, but Naira knew one thing for sure. They were far from alone in this vast and mysterious galaxy, and the journey ahead was going to test everything they knew about life, peace, and survival in deep space. As the rumbling of the alien ship intensified, Captain Naira's heart raced. The lights above them flickered wildly, casting long, erratic shadows across the walls. The strange hum that had once been a distant whisper now resonated like a deep, powerful heartbeat, vibrating through the floor beneath them. Something was happening, something the crew had not anticipated. The alien being, still standing in the center of the room, now radiated a pulse of energy, as though it were in direct communication with the ship itself. Naira felt a chill run down her spine. The calm atmosphere had vanished. The alien's once gentle and inviting demeanor shifted, its eyes now glowing with an intensity that made her uneasy. She glanced around at her crew, Lieutenant Brock, Dr. Torres, and Lieutenant Lin, each of them just as confused and unsure of what was happening as she was. The air around them grew heavy, thick with a sense of impending danger. Without warning, the alien being raised its hand again, but this time, the energy it released wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, almost invasive. Naira's body tensed as an unseen force pressed against her chest, as if the ship itself was alive, trying to control them. She could feel the pulse of its power seeping into her very being, invading her thoughts, her senses. For a split second, she was paralyzed, as though something outside of her had taken control. "Captain," Brock called out, his voice strained. "We need to get out of here. This isn't right." But Naira couldn't move. Her thoughts raced. She tried to focus, to push the alien presence out of her mind, but it was like a weight that pressed down on her very soul. She could feel the alien consciousness reaching out to her, probing, testing. And yet, it wasn't aggressive. It was curious. It was as if the alien was trying to understand them, trying to learn who they were in the most invasive way possible. Dr. Torres, who had been silent up until now, took a step forward, her face pale but resolute. "Captain, I think it's trying to communicate. Not with words, but with feelings, emotions. This thing isn't like us. It's not thinking the way we do." Naira blinked, trying to shake the fog from her mind. Torres was right. The being wasn't trying to harm them. It was trying to establish some kind of link, an understanding. The problem was that this link felt unnatural, like the alien was trying to absorb them into its consciousness, to make them part of it. Suddenly, a jolt of clarity hit Naira. She could feel her own thoughts again. The ship was alive, yes, but not in the way she had first thought. The alien didn't just control the ship, it was one with the ship, connected in a way that transcended anything human technology had ever accomplished. The entire ship, from its walls to its strange pulsing veins, was a living organism, and the alien being was its consciousness, its heart. As she slowly regained control, Naira realized with a cold, sinking feeling that this was far more than a simple first contact. This was an invitation to something far greater, something humanity was not prepared for. This alien being wasn't offering them friendship, it was offering them assimilation. "We need to leave. Now," Naira ordered, her voice firm despite the unease gnawing at her. She turned quickly, signaling to the rest of the crew to follow her. The pressure on her chest eased just slightly, but the sensation of being watched, of being studied, remained. But as they turned to leave, the alien's voice, if it could be called that, echoed in their minds like a whisper carried on the wind. There were no words, only an intense alien presence that invaded their thoughts. "Stay." Naira froze, her hand reaching for the door, but it wouldn't open. She slammed her palm against the control panel, but the door remained sealed. It was as if the ship itself had locked them in. The hum of the alien energy around them deepened, vibrating through their bones, and the light in the chamber dimmed as the walls seemed to pulse with a new rhythm. Faster now, more insistent. "It won't let us leave," Lieutenant Lin said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, clearly afraid. Naira's mind raced. What was happening? Why was the ship rejecting their exit? Was this a trap, or was it something else entirely? She gritted her teeth, her fists clenching. The crew had come here in search of answers, but now, it seemed the questions had multiplied. They weren't just visitors on this ship, they were intruders, and the ship was beginning to fight back. "We need to find out what it wants, what it is," Naira said, her voice low but determined. "Stay alert, everyone. We need to gather as much information as we can." But as she spoke, the alien being's eyes began to glow brighter, and the room around them seemed to shift. The walls no longer felt like walls. They felt like a membrane, pulsing, stretching, alive. The ship was no longer just a structure of metal and alien technology. It was part of something far more complex, a vast, living organism in which the crew was now entangled. And the more Naira thought about it, the more she realized the terrifying truth. They hadn't just stumbled upon a new species. They had entered a symbiotic system, one where humanity could either become a part of it or be destroyed by it. And now, it seemed, the Aurora was no longer in control. The alien ship was making its decision. You said. The air in the alien ship had turned thick, almost suffocating. The walls seemed to ripple with a life of their own, each pulse vibrating through the crew's bodies. Captain Naira could feel her heart race as she struggled to keep calm. Her crew, Lieutenant Brock, Lieutenant Lin, and Dr. Torres, stood close behind her, every step heavy with uncertainty. They were trapped, not just in the ship, but in something far greater, something they couldn't comprehend. The alien being that had once stood still now seemed to move within the walls of the ship itself, its form blending into the living structure around it, becoming part of the very ship. The pressure in the room was suffocating. It was as though the ship was closing in around them, pushing them into a corner where escape was no longer an option. The hum had grown louder, more pronounced. It was no longer a soft, distant sound, but a low growl that seemed to reverberate through the very air, and with each thrum, the crew could feel the energy in the room intensifying. "What's happening?" Brock asked, his voice tight with fear. "The ship's alive. It's like it's responding to us, or controlling us." Naira's eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. The alien being, still connected to the ship by tendrils, was now watching them with an intensity that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. It had not spoken a word, but Naira could feel it, deep within her mind, pushing against her thoughts. The presence was overwhelming. And it wasn't just a mental force. It felt physical, as though the ship itself had reached into her soul. "This ship," Naira began, her voice shaky but firm, "it's not just a vessel. It's alive. It's part of this alien species. It's a collective being, one consciousness, and we've just triggered something." "But what?" Dr. Torres stepped forward cautiously, her face pale but determined. "It's not just controlling the ship. I think it's trying to communicate with us, or absorb us. It's showing us something. It's showing me something." She paused, her eyes wide as if she were seeing something beyond the present moment. I can see its history, its past. It's ancient, older than anything we've ever encountered." Naira clenched her fists, fighting to suppress the rising panic. She could feel it too. The alien was sending them images, visions, of its people, its culture, and something else, something dark and terrifying. She saw flashes of stars exploding, entire civilizations burning, and a strange, almost grotesque form of unity. The alien being, or the ship, was not just a survivor. It was a conqueror. Its history was one of aggression, of consuming everything it came into contact with, spreading its essence across galaxies. This wasn't just a peaceful race. This wasn't a species they could reason with. This was a parasite, a being that assimilated everything, taking what it wanted, discarding the rest. "We've made a mistake," Naira muttered to herself, realizing with a sickening feeling what had happened. The alien wasn't just trying to connect with them. It was trying to take them. It had already begun. Their minds, their bodies, everything about them was being absorbed into the alien consciousness, one thought at a time. She could feel the pressure on her mind increasing, like fingers pressing on her skull, pushing her deeper into the ship's will. She shook her head violently, trying to snap out of the trance. "Captain," Lieutenant Lin shouted, snapping Naira out of her thoughts. "It's getting worse. We have to get out of here. We're not in control anymore." Naira's breath came in short, shallow bursts. She turned to the door, hoping that the ship's hold on them was weakening, but the door remained closed, locked. She hit the control panel again, but there was no response. The ship seemed to be holding them in place. The alien being's presence was everywhere, suffocating, relentless. It was clear now that the ship had no intention of letting them leave. It wanted them. All of them. "Listen to me." Naira shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. We need to break the connection. We need to sever whatever hold it has on us. There has to be a way to disrupt its control over us. Dr. Torres's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a heavy weight. The ship isn't just alive in a physical sense. It's connected to us mentally. If we try to fight it directly, we might end up losing ourselves completely. Then what do we do? Brock demanded. His eyes were wide with fear, and it was clear that his calm exterior was cracking. Naira felt a cold sense of dread wash over her as she looked back at the alien being. It hadn't moved. Its glowing eyes were locked on them, studying them like prey. It was waiting for them to make a mistake, and in their panic, they were playing right into its hands. We have to force it to let us go, Naira said, her voice low but resolute. But to do that, we need to understand it, understand how it communicates. We need to break free from its influence, together. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Each of them knew the risks, but they also knew that staying passive would be a death sentence. The alien being had already shown its power. If they didn't act fast, they would become part of it, part of the ship. And the galaxy would never know they had existed. We have to trust each other, Naira said, her voice gaining strength. We can't let this thing control us. We need to fight back, not just physically, but mentally. We have to sever its influence on us together. But as she spoke, the alien being's tendrils began to shift again, the glow of its eyes growing brighter, more intense. The pulse of energy in the room increased, and Naira could feel the pressure building once more. The ship wasn't just trying to take control, it was trying to force them into submission, into coexistence. And that was something they couldn't allow. If they didn't find a way out soon, they wouldn't just be prisoners. They would be consumed, absorbed into the ship's very existence, lost to the galaxy forever. The crew stood their ground, their minds racing for a solution. But one thing was certain, they weren't going to go down without a fight. The pressure was building, suffocating them from all sides. The ship's pulsing energy was relentless, like a tidal wave crashing over them, drawing them deeper into its will. Naira could feel her heart pounding in her chest as the alien presence surged through her thoughts again. It wasn't just in her mind anymore. It was in every cell of her body, every fiber of her being. The alien ship had embedded itself within them, intertwined with their very existence. It was trying to control them, break their will, and they couldn't let it happen. Captain, Brock shouted, his voice trembling. It's getting worse. The ship, it's not just trying to control us. It's trying to merge with us. Naira felt a sudden coldness settle in her gut. Brock was right. The more they resisted, the more the ship fought back, pushing harder, forcing their minds to bend. It was as though the alien being had found their weakest point and was exploiting it, pushing them to the edge. The connection wasn't just mental anymore. It was becoming physical. She could feel it in her limbs, in the way her heartbeat seemed to slow and then speed up erratically, like the ship was manipulating their biological rhythms. We need to act fast, Naira said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. If we don't break free, we'll become part of this ship, part of it. Dr. Torres was trembling now, her face pale as she clutched the wall for support. But how? How do we break free from something that has already connected to us like this? She whispered, her voice filled with dread. The answer came to Naira in an instant. It was the ship's power. The ship's very nature was to assimilate, to absorb everything it encountered. But it wasn't just absorbing them. It was feeding off their fears, their doubts, their weaknesses. The more they resisted, the more it grew stronger, feeding on their energy. Naira realized with a shock that the only way to fight back wasn't with force, but with unity. They had to stop fearing the ship's power. They had to overcome their own weaknesses. We fight it with our minds, Naira said, her voice filled with newfound determination. Together, we can overcome this. If we trust each other, if we focus on our strength, not the ship's, we can break the connection. The crew looked to each other, fear still evident in their eyes, but Naira's words ignited a spark of hope. For a brief moment, they all nodded in agreement. They couldn't let fear control them. They had to fight back, not with weapons, but with their minds, their wills. Naira took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She could feel the alien presence pressing against her thoughts, trying to force her into submission. But she clenched her fists, focusing on the one thing that no alien ship could take away, her sense of self. Her mind was her own, and it was time to take it back. "Focus," she commanded. "Block out the fear, the pressure. We need to take back control of our minds. Together, we need to break its influence." The crew began to do as Naira said, slowly at first, but then with more strength, more purpose. Brock clenched his jaw and shut his eyes, pushing all the alien thoughts out of his mind. Torres did the same, breathing deeply, focusing on nothing but her own thoughts. Lynn, ever the steady one, was the first to find her footing. Her mind was like a fortress, a wall that blocked the alien influence from breaking through. She focused on the crew, on their shared bond. Naira could feel the change in the air. The pressure on her mind started to ease. The alien ship, once an overwhelming force, now seemed distant, like an echo in the background. It was still there, but it wasn't controlling them anymore. They had severed its connection. "Keep going," Naira urged. "Focus on each other. Strength in unity." The room's energy shifted. The walls, once alive with the ship's pulsating rhythm, now seemed to hum in confusion, as if the ship itself could no longer comprehend what was happening. The alien consciousness, once so certain, now wavered, its grip on the crew weakening. But even as they began to gain ground, Naira couldn't shake the feeling that the alien ship was adapting. This wasn't just a simple machine. They were dealing with a sentient entity, and it wasn't going to give up easily. It had already proven its resilience. They had to finish this, and they had to finish it fast. The walls began to shift again, but this time the crew stood firm, their minds united. They focused not on escape, but on the alien itself, on its power, its presence. Naira could feel the connection weakening, the alien's hold on them fading. It wasn't just about overpowering the ship. It was about outlasting it, outsmarting it, resisting its every attempt to control them. They had become a collective force, a single unit that the ship could no longer break. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the energy in the room shifted again. The pressure lifted, the hum quieted. Naira opened her eyes, and the walls, the ship itself, seemed to breathe in relief. The alien presence was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was passive, uncertain. The ship was no longer trying to merge with them. It had recognized their strength. It had understood that their unity was stronger than its power. For a long moment, the crew stood in stunned silence, their minds still tingling from the experience. They had done it. They had resisted the alien ship's influence. They had broken its hold on them. But Naira knew this wasn't the end. The alien ship was still alive, still watching them, still studying them. The question remained, what would it do next? Would it respect their resistance, or would it continue to try and force them into submission? The crew had won a battle, but the war, whatever that war was, had only just begun. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the soft hum of the alien ship as it pulsed faintly around them. Naira's heart was still racing, her mind trying to process everything that had just happened. They had survived. But at what cost? The crew stood in a tense formation, eyes wide, their minds still recovering from the mental struggle they had just endured. They had broken the alien ship's hold on them, but now they had to deal with the consequences. Naira's hand still rested on the control panel, her fingers twitching as though expecting the ship to respond. It didn't. The walls, once alive with the alien energy, now seemed inert, as if the ship itself was caught in some strange limbo. They had severed the link, but Naira could feel the ship's consciousness still lingering in the air, a silent watcher, waiting for the next move. The alien being that had initiated the connection was no longer standing in the center of the room. In fact, it was nowhere to be seen, though Naira could still feel his presence, deep within the ship's structure. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching, waiting for them to make their next decision. "Captain, what do we do now?" Brock's voice cut through the tension. His usual calm demeanor was shaken, but there was determination in his eyes. He knew this was only the beginning. The battle for control of the ship might have been won, but the war was far from over. Naira turned to face him, her gaze steely. "We don't know what it wants yet, but we have to find out. It's not just going to leave us alone. We need to understand it, and we need to figure out if we can communicate with it, or if we'll be forced to destroy it before it can do the same to us." "We're not equipped for that," Lynn said, her voice tight with worry. "This ship isn't just a vessel. It's a living organism. How are we supposed to fight something like that?" Naira took a deep breath. "We're not going to fight it, not yet. At least, but we do need to get out of here. If we stay here too long, we'll be trapped again, and I'm not willing to risk that. We need to find a way to send a signal, get a distress call out before it can try anything else." Dr. Torres stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "Captain, I agree. But we also need to understand what it's trying to do. If it's assimilating everything in its path, then we might be on the verge of a catastrophic event. Whatever this ship is connected to, it has the power to destroy entire planets." The weight of Torres's words hit Naira like a punch to the gut. The crew hadn't just encountered a new species, they had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. This ship, this alien consciousness, could be the beginning of something far bigger than they could comprehend. "Then we need to get to the heart of this ship," Naira said, her voice filled with resolve. "We have to find out what it's connected to, what its purpose is. If it can destroy entire civilizations, then we need to be ready for it." Brock nodded. "Agreed. But how do we even begin to navigate this ship? We're only just starting to understand how it works, let alone where to go." Naira looked around, her mind racing for a plan. She couldn't let them falter now. She needed to think strategically. First, they had to find the control center, the core of the ship, where its main consciousness likely resided. If they could reach it, they might be able to communicate with it, figure out how to stop it, or at the very least, learn its weaknesses. "Dr. Torres, Lieutenant Brock," Naira said, her voice steady, "we're going to find the central core. I need you two to come with me. Lieutenant Lin, stay here and monitor the ship's systems. See if you can find any weaknesses in its network or any way to send a signal back to the fleet. We need to keep our options open." Lin nodded and immediately began working at a nearby console, her fingers flying across the controls as she accessed the ship's systems. Naira could see the anxiety in her eyes, but there was also a spark of determination. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was a race against time to uncover the truth behind the alien ship and to ensure that humanity didn't become its next victim. As Naira, Brock, and Torres moved deeper into the ship, the atmosphere shifted. The pulsing energy they had felt earlier was less intense now, but the tension in the air remained thick. It was almost as if the ship itself was waiting, anticipating their next move. Every step they took echoed through the dark halls, the ship's walls shifting slightly as if the very structure was alive, reacting to their presence. The corridors twisted and turned, bending in ways that didn't make sense to Naira. It was clear that the ship was designed with a non-human mind. There were no obvious signs of what direction to take. No labels, no readable map. Everything around them felt alien, unnatural. The very walls seemed to pulse with an energy that made it hard to focus. "This place is alive," Torres said quietly, as if speaking too loudly might provoke the ship to act. "It's not just a vessel. It's part of the alien species, part of the consciousness we're dealing with." Naira nodded grimly. "And we're walking through its body. We need to be careful." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shuddered, The ship seemed to respond to their movements, like it was aware of their intrusion. The walls around them flickered with strange symbols and patterns, glowing faintly before fading again. It was as though the ship was listening, understanding that they were getting closer to its core. "Stay sharp," Naira warned, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm. "This ship isn't just some abandoned wreck. It's a predator, and we're in its territory now." The trio moved deeper into the heart of the alien ship, each step bringing them closer to the truth. But with each passing moment, Naira's mind churned with the implications of what they were doing. If they couldn't communicate with the alien consciousness, if they couldn't stop it, it wouldn't just destroy them. It would consume humanity. The entire galaxy could be at risk. And they were the first ones to face it. The path ahead was uncertain, but Naira knew one thing for sure. They had to find a way to outwit this ship, or humanity's fate would be sealed.